Why is it that in humanity's darkest moments, when everything is falling apart, our attention gets yanked toward beauty standards that shouldn't matter at all, but are packaged so seductively we start believing they do? I'm back. I'm a bit nervous to be back, but here I am. I've missed you. I'm not too sure if you've missed me, but are you ready? Imagine this: whole cities emptied by disease, banners of war snapping over smoking ruins, fields stripped down to bare dirt, and in the middle of all that terror and uncertainty, people still cared about how they looked. They didn't just groom, they reinvented what beauty even meant. Because when life feels fragile, when survival isn't guaranteed, communities don't walk away from beauty. They cling to it, they paint it, write it, dress it, and even weaponize it. Beauty becomes this strange little mirror reflecting everything people fear, desire, lose, or desperately hope for. When the world cracks open, beauty doesn't fade, it mutates. And today, we're diving into three huge moments of societal unraveling: plague, war, and straight up political collapse, and how each of them reshaped what people found attractive and why. Let's get into it. Let's start in the medieval world, where death isn't an idea, it's a smell, a sound, a force, and for artists and writers, it becomes the dominant aesthetic. When the Black Death tore across Europe in the mid 1300s, killing up to half the population in some regions, it didn't just devastate communities, it rewired their imagination. Art historian Millard Mice, in Painting in Florence and Siena After the Black Death, points out that medieval art changes overnight. Bodies become thinner, paler, more solemn, more grounded in a grim realism. Beauty becomes inseparable from fragility. You get the danse macabre, skeletons leading the living in a grisly parade. These weren't horror images, they were accessible, everywhere, painted on church walls, in manuscripts, in public squares. The skeletons smile, they tease, they dance, they're charismatic, because the audience watching them knew death intimately. Beauty isn't about perfection, beauty becomes about recognizing your own mortality. Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron, written during the plague, reads like an escape fantasy. 10 young nobles flee Florence and distract each other with sexy, funny, sometimes downright scandalous stories. But scholars like Teodolinda Barolini argue that underneath the erotic storytelling is this refusal to let death have the last word. Flirting becomes resistance, pleasure becomes defiance, beauty, in the sense of charm, sensuality, desire, becomes an act of survival. Medievalist Caroline Walker Bynum writes about how post plague art fixates on rot and decay: wilting flowers, rotting fruit, bodies in various stages of decomposition, not because people became morbid, but because they became philosophical. Beauty mattered because it didn't last. The plague reshaped beauty into a reminder: you're alive now, and that's the whole point. And the Black Death wasn't the last time plague reshaped the way people thought about beauty. Later outbreaks, especially the repeated plague waves that hit Europe in the 1500s and 1600s, kept feeding this same aesthetic of fragility. Artists continued painting wilted flowers, skulls tucked into the corners of portraits, hourglasses, candles burning down to their stubs, the entire vanitas tradition. This wasn't just religious moralizing, it was a beauty language. Early modern Europeans understood that a body could shift from vibrant to lifeless in a single night, so portraits often emphasized pale skin, delicate features, and this impossible to miss sense of impermanence. Beauty and mortality stayed braided together for centuries because plague never fully went away. It just kept reminding people that life was temporary, and beauty even more so. Now, fast forward a few centuries. The plague's aesthetic of bones and decay gets replaced with something almost perversely opposite. In the 18th and 19th centuries, tuberculosis, commonly known as consumption at the time, becomes fashionable. Not joking, not exaggerating, but fashionable. Tuberculosis makes you pale, thin, flushed. It creates glassy eyes and delicate features, and society, especially artists, romanticize it. Sociologist Catherine Byrne, in Tuberculosis and the Victorian Literary Imagination, writes that the disease becomes fetishized. The consumptive body is recast as pure, sensitive, ethereal, the ultimate tragic beauty. Portrait painters deliberately give women narrow shoulders, luminous skin, barely their frames. And to achieve this look, women used arsenic based powders to mimic the pallor. Yes, arsenic. Now let's take a look at operas. In Verdi's La Traviata and Puccini's La Boheme, TB becomes a theatrical shorthand for doomed beauty. Medical historian Clark Lawler describes these heroines as cultural performances of consumptive glamour. Audiences expected fragile beauty, the flushed cheeks, the delicate bones, the sense that the body was simply too sensitive for the world. And this wasn't just fiction. Lord Byron famously leaned into this aesthetic fantasy when he said, and I quote, "I should like to die of a consumption, because the ladies would all say, 'Look at that poor Byron, how interesting he looks in dying.'" And he wasn't joking. God damn it, Byron. I have a bone to pick with you, but I'm not going to get into my feelings about Byron. It's not like I knew Byron personally. He died 159 years before I was born, and I'm not going to attack his writing. But from how others describe Byron's personality and character, he just irks me. He sounds like a pretentious, pompous ass. But I digress. Let's move on with the episode. But perhaps the most haunting example is John Keats, who also died of tuberculosis. His friend Joseph Severn, who sat with him during those final months in Rome, wrote that Keats's face in death was, and I quote, "beautiful, calm, luminous, almost transfigured." Severn's description spread quickly through literary circles, reinforcing the idea that TB bestowed a kind of tragic, poetic purity. Keats wasn't just admired as a poet, his death became part of the aesthetic myth of the consumptive artist. Victorian readers romanticized his suffering, describing him as looking more angelic in death, the ultimate merging of genius, fragility, and beauty. This is how powerful the consumptive beauty myth became. It could turn the violent collapse of your lungs into a symbol of heightened sensibility and eroticized fragility. Excuse the language, my friends, but what the fuck was wrong with us? Plagues and TB created beauty cultures built around vulnerability, but one is about bones and blunt realism, and the other is about tragic eroticism. The point is, disaster doesn't destroy beauty, it remixes it. And that exact pattern repeats when we reach the world wars. If the plague made us stare at death and TB made us eroticize it, war shows us how beauty can be militarized. Before we dive back in, I want to share something special I've been working on. If you enjoy a good whodunit set in a different historical world each episode, with a fresh set of characters every time, this might be for you. Somewhere in history, a crime waits in the dark. The year changes, the place shifts, but the truth, it hides in plain sight. Welcome to Murder Through Time, where each case drops you into a different era, shaped by real customs and real dangers. Pay attention to alibis that wobble, motives that feel a little too neat, and details that don't sit right. You're the detective in every case. Think you can catch the culprit? The game begins now. You'll find Murder Through Time, a Whodunit Across the Centuries on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New mysteries appear every other Monday. So let's take a look at World War I and the birth of the modern beauty industry. Before World War I, makeup was scandalous. Proper women didn't wear rouge. Cosmetics were for actresses and women of the night. Oh my. Then the war hits, and everything changes. Women flood into public life. Factories, transport, communications, offices, hospitals. Their appearance becomes visible, not private. Historian Kathy Pice in Hope in a Jar calls World War I the moment modern beauty is born. Cosmetic brands explode. Powder and rouge become symbols of modern femininity. Ads literally tell women that keeping up appearances boosts morale. Beauty becomes patriotic, a soft weapon in the war effort. Women in munitions factories handle dangerous chemicals that stain and poison their skin. They're nicknamed Canary Girls. And yet, newspapers gush about the pretty munitionettes, praising their hairstyles, neat uniforms, and cheerful faces. Beauty wasn't there to honor them, it was there to sanitize the horror. World War I permanently changes men's grooming. Gas masks require shaved faces, so clean shaven becomes the new masculine ideal, associated with discipline, hygiene, and modernity. The war drags men's beauty into industrial modernity. After years of trauma, grief, and rationing, the world swings into the jazz age. Bobbed hair, short skirts, dramatic makeup, nightlife. Fashion historian Jane Shrimpton calls this aesthetic relief. Beauty is rebirth. World War I created the beauty industry we know. World War II turns beauty into something even bigger. Governments push the idea that neat grooming and cheerful femininity keep morale alive, and women take on massive roles in the workforce, but they're told to stay feminine while doing it. Beauty becomes emotional discipline, reassurance that the world is still orderly, even when it's violently not. And guess what? Lipstick is never rationed, not even when metal and food are scarce. Elizabeth Arden releases Victory Red. Revlon answers with Patriot Red. And Winston Churchill himself is rumored to have supported continued lipstick production because it boosted morale. Yes, the man who idolized Mussolini. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Red lipstick becomes a battle cry. We're still alive. We're still fighting. We're still us. And then comes Rosie the Riveter. Now, Rosie is strong, muscular, and immaculately groomed. Perfect brows, red lips, flawless skin, hair tucked into a neat bandana. She tells women they can join the workforce, but without challenging femininity itself. She's liberation with conditions. And then the pinup aesthetic explodes. Smiling, glamorous, wholesome sex appeal. These images travel with soldiers. They're hung in barracks, folded into pockets, taped to tanks. Military psychologists believe pinups reduce fear and loneliness. They symbolize what soldiers are fighting for: life, romance, domesticity, a future. Beauty becomes emotional survival. During the war, there's rationing. So, with shortages everywhere, women invent wartime beauty hacks: burnt matchstick eyeliner, beetroot blush, cacao contour, petroleum jelly for shine. Scarcity sparks creativity. Beauty becomes clever, resourceful, patriotic. If plague made beauty fragile and war made it patriotic, our era makes it political. Beauty as ideology. Cultural historian George Moss, in Nationalism and Sexuality, shows how societies in crisis cling to rigid, ideal bodies, disciplined, pure, orderly, and use them as political symbols. Beauty becomes a sorting mechanism. Who belongs, who threatens the system, who fits the nation's idealized image. We see this in plague art, we see it in wartime propaganda, we see it in our own time in ways that might feel familiar. Today's sense of collapse isn't one single event, it's layered. Climate anxiety, economic instability, political extremism, post pandemic tension, surveillance technology, gender backlash. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman describes this as liquid modernity: fast, unstable, and terrifying. And in liquid times, people crave solid rules. Beauty becomes one of them, a false sense of order. Now, unless you've been hiding somewhere with no Wi Fi, you've probably noticed the global rise of ultra conservative, right wing governments. And surprise, surprise, the parallel rise of right-wing beauty aesthetics. Historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat, in her study Strongmen, explains how authoritarian movements use aesthetics as political language. Nostalgic femininity, hyper-controlled masculinity, clean and orderly bodies. Beauty becomes moral, beauty becomes nationalistic, beauty becomes propaganda. An example of this is the tradwife aesthetic: long hair, youthfulness, natural minimal makeup, domestic softness. It's sold as empowerment. But theorists like Sophie Lewis and scholars writing in Signs show it functions as moral judgment. It says, this is the right kind of woman. This is proper beauty. This lifestyle is pure. Deviation becomes a threat. In the beauty myth, Naomi Wolf argues beauty is a political system, a way of regulating behavior through appearance. Crucially, she notes that beauty demands intensify when women gain rights and visibility. Beauty becomes backlash, and in times of cultural panic, beauty becomes a pressure valve for anxieties about gender, freedom, and power. Now we can't forget wellness culture and the myth of purifying the body. Historian Nancy Tomes calls modern wellness surveillance medicine, where bodies are constantly monitored and judged. Sociologist Jessica Paddock notes wellness markets turn structural problems into personal responsibility. You're tired? Purify. You're aging? Fix it. You're overwhelmed? Detox. Beauty stops being pleasure. It becomes discipline. And finally, we arrive at the algorithm. Researchers find Instagram and TikTok reward youth-coded features, symmetry, thinness, Eurocentric traits, strict gender presentation. Writer Gia Tolentino calls this optimization culture, a system where beauty becomes a constant project of refinement for unseen metrics. It's the same historical pattern, except now the enforcer is software. Beauty becomes automated ideology. Beauty in times of crisis isn't frivolous. It's how we make sense of ourselves when everything feels uncertain. Every era, plague, war, collapse, used beauty to talk about fear, desire, power, identity, morality, and survival. The version of beauty we're handed during instability is never neutral, my friends. It's a blueprint for who society thinks we should be and who it thinks we shouldn't. So the next time you see a beauty trend wrapped in moral language like clean, natural, effortless, disciplined, pure, healthy, ask yourself this: who benefits from this definition of beauty and who gets punished by it? Because beauty doesn't vanish during crisis. It tightens, hardens, and tells a story about who we really are when the world starts to crack. I hope you enjoyed our first episode back of Beauty Unlocked. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with your colleagues, friends, family, hell, even your enemies. Anyone who needs a little reminder that beauty culture has always been a historical hot mess. And do us a huge favor. Don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps us out. Until next time, my love buckets, be safe out there, take care of yourselves and of each other, and remember to stay curious, always. You'll hear from me again next week. Bye!
Make it clap, clap, clap. Make it clap, clap. Make it clap, clap. Make it clap, clap. Make it clap.